Hello and welcome to the 2% Scaling Strategies for Women Entrepreneurs. My name is Eleanor Beaton. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And today's live stream show is really for all you entrepreneurs and leaders out there who, through the most unfortunate of global circumstances, are working from home. So today, more than ever before, COVID-19 is really shining a light on virtual work and how to work effectively from home or virtually when you literally can't get to the office. And so whether you have been working virtually for years, like I have with my team, or potentially you've never done virtual work and you've now been thrown into a virtual work situation, this is the time to really sharpen our skill set at leading and managing virtual teams. So over the course of the next 25 minutes or so, myself and my incredible guest here are going to share with you some very practical strategies on how you can lead and manage a virtual team and do it in a way that really enhances your work over the next 30, 60, 90 days and beyond. So I want to make sure that you go ahead and post any questions that you have as they come up in the comments. We will take some time at the end of our conversation to answer any of your questions, any and all of your questions. We're open books. We're happy to answer. Tara Powers is my guest today.
Hello.
She is an expert. Hey, Tara, she's an expert in virtual teams and leadership. She's the author, literally, of the book Virtual Teams for Dummies, and the CEO of Powers Resource Center. And here's the deal. I can remember I met Tara at an event probably about, I don't know, 2 years
ago. Yeah.
We were talking about virtual teams and she had a copy of her book. She gave it to me and I have used this extensively. So as soon as this situation came about, I was like, Tara is really the person for us to talk to today. It's for you to share your insight. So Tara, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad I gave you that book. And here we sit, right?
Here we are.
Who would have thought it would be under these circumstances? But
know.
So grateful to be here with your community and happy to offer as many tips as I can in the time that we have.
Yeah. So where are you today?
I am in Colorado, and you'll notice it's a little dark. It is actually cold and it looks like it's going to snow. I have all my lights on, but still just really overcast. But yeah, I live in Colorado.
So I want to start, I want to begin with the people out there. I'm thinking about doctors, lawyers, accountants, people who, trainers maybe. So people who are now they've had a brick and mortar office and now they're making the transition into virtual work. So people who are generally, they're used to going into an office, running their business from there, running their teams from there. Now they're working virtually. What are the biggest, what are you hearing from folks? What are the biggest things they're struggling with right now? Those people who aren't like us and have run virtual teams for years.
Right. I think one of the biggest struggles I'm noticing between any employee and a team that they work on who are now all virtual is that they don't have clear agreements in place about the technology they're going to use and for what the purpose is. Their methods of communicating. So when is it appropriate to use visual video conferencing? When is it appropriate to chat? When does that make sense? And then the third thing is probably, I would say, the most painful right now, is really recognizing and talking about and agreeing on what is reasonable in terms of availability. Because what I'm seeing happen is we're leaving our offices and we are expecting, whether we're putting those expectations on ourselves or our managers have this expectation that we're going to be exactly as productive. And we're holding more meetings and people aren't getting time to work. And in addition to that, let's layer on that we're now at home with potentially many other distractions. And if you're parents, another full-time job of parenting, which now we have to add on top of that. So there's really this agreement that needs to be made or a discussion about what seems reasonable in the time frame we're in right now in terms of availability, response time, turnarounds on deliverables, what time of day we're available, what is the expectation on weekends and in the evenings. Those type of things is what I'm really seeing is most painful for people.
Right. And that makes a ton of sense. It's not just like, especially if you've been in a brick and mortar situation and now you're in a virtual situation, that's not the only thing that's changed. In some ways, one of our team members actually worked in a brick and mortar office and then came and started working with us in a virtual office. And one of the things that she talked about is just the pace of work is a little different. How people work is a little different. It's a different ball game, know? And so having really great agreements. So here's a question for you. So as a leader, when you say, okay, like having a really good agreement in place about how we're going to communicate, when we're going to communicate, what might that look like? Like tangibly, how would they go about actually doing that?
Yeah. So let's talk about the technology one first. So one of the most important things, any of you who are leaders listening to this call, and if you're a team member, take this information back to your team and your leader. But it is so important as quickly as possible, you agree as a team on what technology tools are we using and for what purpose. So one of the worst things that can happen is we start to go out and buy, 10 different tools for tracking progress, for instant messaging, for project tracking, for video conferencing. That will very quickly overwhelm people. And so if you do have some tools already in place, get to know them, train people on them, and agree how are we going to use these and for what purpose. So that is the first agreement. The communication's a little bit different. So when I wrote the book Virtual Teams for Dummies, one of the things that I really recognized, and you probably have figured this out, I've been working virtually with my team for 10 years and 20 years myself. It is really important we choose the right communication method for the situation. And I give people two things to think about. What is the chance of misunderstanding? And what is the risk to the relationship? And what I mean by that is if the chance of misunderstanding my message is high because it's technical, it's a lot of information, maybe this person is new to the job, then I need to do something differently. So I might need to write it up and send it ahead of time. And then we get on a video conference and we talk through it, right? Because that chance of misunderstanding is high. Instant messaging, texting, probably not the good choice there. Same thing with level of risk to the relationship. If I have worked in an office with people that maybe I've had conflict with, or right before all this happened, we just had, a difficult situation that we went through and our trust isn't very high right now. That is also when we need to do as much of being face-to-face as possible. And what I see happening is it's so easy when you're virtual to hide behind texting, instant messaging. And if there is conflict and a lack of trust there, very quickly that will become a bigger problem. People will get more siloed. They won't share information. They will tend to be doing a lot of stuff on their own and not sharing it with their team. So those are the two things that I really recommend you think about when you're choosing your method of communication. Any questions about those two things?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it's interesting when you talked about, the method of communication and how we're going to communicate. One of the things that I've noticed, and this is especially true right now, where I think, leaders and teams are doing all they can to sort of have a state of equanimity, to communicate calm, to really be that and show up that way. But there's still a heightened sense of stress in the workplace right now. One of the things that I find is that sometimes it's like studies of people driving through fog. What they found is that people actually speed up as they're driving through fog because they want to get out of it.
Right. Bad idea.
Bad idea. What they really need to do is slow down. And so one of the things that I have been noticing is how in communication, so in our team, we use Slack. So we don't do, internal communications. It's the only tool we use to communicate in a written form. We use Slack, is to slow down the back and forth. So we're not just, we're being methodical and thoughtful and intentional about how we're communicating with people through instant chat. so that people can actually get work done.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. So that is a really important point, is that we are so, now that we're virtual, our initial reaction is to what I'm seeing is people are having actually more meetings, right? Because they're in this state of chaos right now. And that might feel good. It might feel like, hey, let's just simulate what we did in the office. We're going to do the same thing here. And because that feels like the right thing to do, and maybe it's comforting, but in the long term, that is actually hurting your productivity in a virtual environment. And the reason for that is because just like you mentioned, we have to be more strategic about when we're reaching out to each other. I appreciate more written communication, less meetings, right? We don't need to necessarily have a meeting for a progress update. Let's use a Slack channel for that, where we can all go out there and see what everybody's working on this week and where they're at, and what obstacles they might think they run into and how I might be able to help. So it's important that before we send that quick text, know that that is an interruption. Most people will stop what they're doing. If they were focused, that breaks their focus. They will answer you. That actually, we know how the brain works. It takes a lot more time to then refocus on the task. So I've seen a lot of companies actually, this is an idea that may or may not work, but holding office hours, right? So maybe we hold office hours daily. And if I can keep my question until your office hour, Eleanor, which might be 3 to 4 o'clock, that's when you're open for questions, right? And we send all our questions. Now, if it's an emergency, that doesn't work. But that might be a way to agree. How do we limit all of the interruptions through communication that get us from doing any work?
Yeah,
Because that's
totally.
what's happening. Yeah.
And that's so interesting, how sometimes you can see a tendency that you might have, that I might have personally. Oh, it's just a quick, when it's actually not quick. You've just taken everybody off. A tool that I'll recommend that was recommended to me by a brilliant woman named Chris Plackey is this idea of filters. So what we do in our team is that we run everything through filters. So there's a delegation filter. So if you need to ask somebody to do something, rather than a quick, you need to think through, what am I asking this person to do?
Yes.
Why do we need to do it? How do I expect them to do it? If you need to, what are the things I need to consider? When is it due by? And what are the milestones where I want to check in?
Absolutely.
And every time we do a filter like that, it reduces the back and forth. Like, you can tell when something goes wrong with a project or there's multiple, it's because somebody didn't do a filter.
You're right. You didn't go through those questions.
Yep. Or a Zoom request from me, or might have to be a Zoom request from myself. But that's a great example.
And can I say one more thing really quick about the state of kind of stress that this is very different, right? Many people did not choose to work from home.
No.
They have been mandated to work from home. And there is a whole layer of stress that everybody is dealing with, whatever that may be. Worry about your job, worry about money, worry about family, getting sick. I mean, so many things that we normally don't have to worry about. And one of the most important things that leaders can do when people are under stress is to provide as many guidelines as possible. Your example is a great example. Let's start using filters when we communicate, right? And here's the questions I would like all of us to ask ourselves. You probably know, because I'm sure you study a lot, what happens to the brain when we're under high levels of stress is it's very difficult to think strategically. Sometimes we get frozen, we get tunnel vision, right? So it is helpful for managers to be really providing guidelines and really having a heavy dose of empathy right now. And grace is one of the other things, is that we cannot expect people to be operating at the same level of productivity that they were 2 weeks ago. It's not a reasonable expectation. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, truth. True that.
True that. Yeah.
True that. So, and a couple of things, and these are sort of some technical things too, but if you haven't, so if you're used to live streaming, so I have some lights set up here. There's some things that I learned from live streaming. One of the things that I think is also, important for people, so to think about. So I will sometimes get on Zoom calls with people who aren't accustomed to it, and their video isn't on.
Yeah.
So you'll have one person with video on, one person with video off. turn on your videos, people.
Yep.
What I mean?
Yes.
On your videos, it's so the difference in meetings. I remember initially when we were doing when we integrated Zoom, about a third of the people wouldn't have their cameras on, and now
Yeah.
we don't allow it. You know,
Right. So this is an agreement, right, that we agree to as a team. And right now, having your videos on is really important because social connection actually is more important right now than a lot of the other stuff we're focused on. People, again, because of the stress, this sense of isolation for some people who may be at home by themselves. Social connection is important, and this is the number one way we do it virtually, obviously. But when not knowing how long this goes on, there is some strategy also to when to turn your videos on. And so in the future, that becomes part of our agreement as well. One of the key things to think about is when you're building trust or you're checking in with each other personally just to see how you're doing, really good to have your video on, right? Makes a big difference. I even tell people, just turn it on quick at the beginning of a meeting if it's an information one way kind of, hey, I got to send this information out. Just say hello. Then maybe you don't need your video on for the whole meeting. But the second thing is when we're debating an idea, when there's conflict, videos on, right? Remember all those questions: risk to the relationship, chance of misunderstanding. Down the road, when we start getting in the flow here of working virtually, then perhaps we may be able to have conference calls for some quick things. But right now, that social connection, super important.
Yeah. So here's a question that, it has come up a number of times as I've talked to people about the switch to working virtually, which is, how do I know that people are doing the work that I actually wanted them to do? Which is a great question,
Yes.
and the
Yep.
easy answer is always, well, if you're not sure, maybe you shouldn't have hired them, which is the flip answer that I hear sometimes.
Right.
There's a grain of truth, but in fairness though, as there's a management component of what we as leaders are doing, which is that accountability and checking in. So what strategies, any tips or strategies that you can share on that for people?
Yeah. So one of the biggest mindset shifts for managers in moving to this new remote environment is shifting how they trust their people. Absolutely the biggest mindset shift for leaders. And you're right, it goes back to the hiring process, but we may have employees who maybe for whatever reason, maybe they didn't meet expectations before and we're concerned we can't see them doing the work. I wrote a blog post once. If a tree falls in the forest and no one was there to hear it, does it actually make a sound? It's actually no different. If I can't see my employee, are they actually doing any work? So we wrote a lot of articles on that, because here is what is required of leaders. This is required that you step up and be better at providing clarity, expectations, and agreement on deliverables and check-ins. You have to do a better job up front having those conversations and creating that accountability up front with your team. And then you have to trust that they are going to step up and let go. What you have to shift your mindset to assessing is not how much work they're getting done, but the quality of the work. And the quality of the work can be assessed virtually, right? You can assess that from anywhere when they turn it into you. But what we have to get away from is this mindset that I have to actually see them pounding away on their laptop, and then that means they're working. Probably doesn't mean they were working, but you thought so. So it's really a shift in what we're assessing. And I think doing a much better job up front with clarity. Clarity is so very important.
Give me an example of like what that looks like in real time. So say it's Sunday, and you're a leader and you're getting prepped for the week ahead. Can you give me like a practical example?
Yeah.
How is the leader they're going to bring this?
Yep. So this combines a couple things I was saying. So one of the best practices that I've used and I've seen other leaders who are virtual use is Monday morning, they are sending out a written update. Kind of where are we since last week? So they did some progress check-ins with their team, any new information that they might have, especially because we're in this ever-changing situation. And then asking each team member, what is going to be your top 3 priorities for this week? What support do you need? What obstacles do you think you may run into? And what solutions do you have for those obstacles? And when can I expect the deliverables? And then there's maybe some negotiation around that. But that is happening every Monday, consistently with every employee. So right there, we are building our agreement for what are the priorities we're working on, what are the expectations that we have of when they will get done. What you might even talk about what success looks like, right? If you need to make sure that they're doing it the right way with the right tools and involving the right people, what support do they need, and agreeing on when they're going to deliver it. And that needs to happen consistently. So that may, what the shift there that may be different for people is these deliverable agreements or priority agreements, whatever you want to call them, need to happen really weekly. And probably when we were in the office, we didn't do it that often, right? I don't know how often people did it, but what probably wasn't that often. So that is a shift. And that would be an example of a best practice.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's like the Monday morning update.
Yep.
So, and you've talked about sort of these, weekly, daily meetings. We do 3 team meetings a week. 2 of them are like a stand-up meeting. One's a focused meeting. And I have found that having a really clear agenda around that is very helpful too. What are your best practices around like a stand-up, a virtual huddle that's happening? I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So 2 things. I recommend that you're doing virtual huddles, maybe at the beginning of the week or midweek, or however often you think you need them right now, that are social in nature. So that's one thing, right? Do not just right now, a lot of people are not thinking about the social component. People just need to know that they're, I care, how you doing? How is your weekend? How's things going with the kids? How is everybody feeling? Really important. The second thing is, when you are having a meeting, right? Whether you call it a huddle or a team meeting, having that agenda or questions that I want my team prepared to answer it used to be nice to do in the office. I feel like this is a non-negotiable when you're virtual. And the reason being is because we have very different styles of people. And if you know anything about leadership styles or personality styles, half of the population is processors, thinkers. And so if we are having a team meeting virtually and we're putting a question out there we want everybody to solve in the moment, you're losing probably 50% of good ideas because those processors, they want to think about it. They want to do a little research on it. They want to consider an experience they've had in the past that relates to what you're asking them. So you're going to hear 50% of the ideas that are possible if you're not preparing people ahead of time. And so when you are doing those virtual meetings, if you're leading them or you are the meeting leader, sending out an agenda, or at least what do I want you to come having answers to or ideas about. Super, super important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is a real theme, it's like when things feel like they're speeding up, when there's a lot of uncertainty, or, you're lacking a dimension like that true face-to-face dimension, preparedness.
Yes.
Preparedness is one of the major solutions here, to the question. So,
and Eleanor, just really quickly, I encourage all of you, because I know a lot of people on this call are, own their own business or are leaders. Just look around at the companies that had a preparedness strategy for what we're facing right now. They are shining, like they are standing out amazingly. So I just wanted to mention that preparedness idea is really important. Yeah.
Totally. And it's not too late to prepare.
No, definitely not.
You can prepare right now.
Start now. Yes.
Start now. The time.
Start now, today.
That everybody didn't want.
Yep.
But here it is. Yeah. And we've got a comment here from Debbie. She's saying, I hate when I get bombarded in a meeting with topics I was not expecting.
Yes.
And for those of us who are like talker processors, this is a great reminder, send out those, do the work.
Yeah.
send out, do your work, get prepared, help your people, in this way. So let's get super tactical here. So
Sure.
what are some of your favorite, your sort of top tactical advice? I'll give you an example. I was interviewing somebody once, and she was doing a virtual, and there was a window right behind her head. And
Yes.
so she had her computer facing her, and there's a window behind her,
Oh,
so we couldn't see her face. She was in darkness. So my tip is, guys, wherever you can,
light. Yeah.
face the window. Yeah,
Yep.
face the light, so that's what lights up your face, so you're not in shadows on a practical thing.
Yep.
Again, it makes an impact. Any other sort of tactical
Yes.
tools that you would share around virtual?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, and I'm doing a lot of teaching around this right now. So I got them right at the tip of my
I
tongue
got
here.
it.
I got it.
Yeah.
So because we are sharing bandwidth with everyone else in our house, when you are on an important meeting and you notice your computer's running slow, couple things for you to do. Number one, we got to set expectations and preparedness with our families. I do that every morning. My husband and I, we have here's our little, we just got it off of,
Oh my gosh.
yep,
Oh
we
my
got
gosh.
a little planner that we,
Everything you need to know about Tara.
well, and it's important, right? But I also let them know when I'm going to be on an important webinar or live stream like this, so that they are not using up bandwidth. So we have to agree to share the bandwidth. Second, sometimes we have 50 things open on our laptop. That will also eat up bandwidth. And then the last thing around bandwidth is if you can plug directly into your modem, that's going to help speed up your bandwidth. So that's just the one thing around bandwidth. In terms of people who are working at home with family members, and especially young children, I have been virtual for 20 years, and I have a 12 and a 10-year-old. And so one of the things I learned early on when they were young is I needed a creative way to let them know it was okay to come in and bother me or talk to me or ask me a question, or it wasn't. And so I color coded different things. I would have a red shaped heart with a please wait, right? And I would give them little sticky notes and have crayons outside. If they wanted to draw me a little picture and slide it under the door, they could still communicate with me, but they knew the red meant please wait and the green meant come on in, right? I had a green heart or a red heart. Right now I have a green sign hanging on my door, webinar in progress, or LinkedIn, live stream in progress, please be quiet. The kids know to take the dog upstairs. They put up a gate. Like, we have set all these expectations about what it looks like when I am running a webinar with clients or doing a live stream, and how do we support each other? So not only do we need to do this stuff with our team, but if you have people that are at home with you right now, which many of us do, we also have to have a preparedness plan in place at home.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that color coded. I know a woman who ran her team virtually when her kids were small. And what she gave them was a red card and a green card. So if there was something, because she was working every day, so they'd
Yeah.
come home from school and she'd be on calls. So if they knew these are red card situations and these are green cards,
Emergency, not that big of a deal. Yeah.
so they
Perfect.
would take a card and put it under her door. And so
Mhm.
green, it's like when you're off your next call, I need to talk to you. If it's a red, it's like somebody's bleeding.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, you gotta stop the press, right? Like,
Right.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me say, there was another tip I think is really important for everybody to think about, is how do you be a good virtual team participant, right?
Mhm.
And I think you were talking about lighting is really important. I really encourage everybody to try and designate some space in your house for these type of things, right? For work. Not everybody has an office. It can be your kitchen table. It might be your couch. It might be your bedroom. But designating a place where you're doing these type of things, it sends a signal to your brain. It sends a signal to the people living with you, like, okay, mommy, daddy is working, and they're doing something pretty important. It's very helpful to designate that space. It also can be helpful when you start your workday and end your workday, that you start and end at the same space. So that's, again, just brain wise, helping you to try and make that transition, right, from work to non-work. The other thing I would say is looking presentable. So not only from the waist up, I always say sometimes I'm in my sweats, I'm not today, but getting presentable from the waist up and just thinking about what's on your desk or in front of you. If you really, and I encourage people to be engaged, obviously, in virtual team meetings, even make it a goal to give 3 comments or 3 ideas on whenever you're on a meeting. That keeps you engaged. But clean off your desk. If you got piles, just put them on the ground because it keeps you engaged. Another idea is stand up, right? I do a lot of standing meetings. I also, if I'm working with my team and it's a nice day out and we all can do it, we do a walking meeting. So there's a lot of different ideas, for working at home to keep yourself engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a great, and this is something that, anybody who's been on camera or who's done on camera training, it's a little tip, but when you're on camera, one of the things I think is important for people to realize is that your energy, it actually kind of sucks the energy out of presentation,
Mhm.
So I'm more like, I said to Tara as we were turning on, I was like, you'll know we're online because my eyes will light up. And it's like this thing from, knowing that on very often if you're sort of quiet and very toned and subdued, which is totally okay, that
Mhm.
actually comes across double on
Yeah,
online.
right.
So just thinking through like energy levels and how that translates in a video, in
Yeah.
a video setting. Just some amazing tips. So there's a question here, both from Blair Cook, hi Blair, and Kim McDonald. They're both asking, why Slack and not Teams? So
Mm,
there's so many tools out there. For me, we use Slack. It's ideal, just because that's where we got started. Teams is, I believe, a Microsoft
it
Office.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit more robust than what
Mhm.
we particular need. So we like to use Slack. But really, and people like to know this, we use Slack, we use Zoom, Slack for communication, Zoom for our meetings,
Mhm.
Google Drive for internal storage, Dropbox for sharing client files. So we actually use 2 different ones, and we use Basecamp for project management. So
Great.
these are just little tools, just it can be helpful for people as you're thinking through. But to Tara's point off the top, everybody has to be clear what the tool is used for
Right.
and where you're going to communicate. That is the most important thing. It's more important than the tool itself, I find.
Yeah, and knowing where to go to get what I need, right?
Yeah,
So, actually, the founders of Basecamp, who I love, they've
yeah,
written many books on remote work, and they've been a 20-year-old virtual company. I actually interviewed him in my book, so he is Jason is in my Virtual Teams for Dummies book. But
love it.
one of the things that they say, which I love, is establish one source of truth. What is the repository of information where if I, started working for you tomorrow, Eleanor, I know that on Google Docs is where we keep decisions that we make, updates, like where is that one place that people know I can go for information? Even if you're communicating via Slack, when you make decisions, do we need to summarize that and maybe put it in a Google Drive so people can find it easily? I don't know. But
Yeah.
it's really helpful that we agree on what is going to be that one source of information. So in this time of stress, when I may not remember what I agreed to in a meeting, what was said in a meeting, what my manager asked me to do in a meeting, right? We forget when we're stressed like this. Our brain they're not functioning optimally right now. They're thinking of making sure we're safe.
Yeah.
So where can I go to remind myself of what was discussed, what agreements were made, and what I'm responsible for? Super important to think about that. Yeah.
Well, this is just so great. And for those of you who are running virtual teams, there's really some excellent resources here in this book and with Tara generally about how to really have your virtual team operate the most efficiently that it can, the best that it can. And for those of you who are getting started, you didn't want to be in this situation, but here we are, and this may be a situation that you're in for 3 weeks or 3 months or more, then really understanding how to leverage this. I have a sense that what has happened is going to impact how we operate virtually forever.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
this is a skill that is going to be useful to people
Yep.
their entire life. So you can go check out Virtual Teams for Dummies. Tara, where else can people go to learn about you and the work that you do and how to engage with you?
Yeah, so powersresourcecenter.com is our website. We're actually building out a free resource page as we speak.
Yeah.
So a lot of the tips I've talked about today, I'm going to do some videos for executives who support virtual teams, the leaders right now who are leading those teams, and team members. So I'm going to have some free videos. We're going to be putting a lot of infographics up there, and adding additional resources. So just visit the site, powersresourcecenter.com. I also have a site right now called virtualteamschool.com, and there are some good resources out there. We did some research, which is what led us to write that book on what makes virtual teams effective. And excuse me, you can find the white paper. You can find an executive summary of that research, and it gives a lot of the similar tips and more that we just talked about. So virtualteamschool.com or powersresourcecenter.com. And can I say one more thing? I just want everybody to know you guys can do this, right? It is not rocket science to work from home. And I am amazed every day at the resiliency of companies, and every single one of you, you're doing it, right? We're doing it. We are making this happen. And I just want everybody who's listening to continue to look for opportunities to point out how resilient we actually are, because every day I'm amazed, every single day.
You know
And
what?
yeah,
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Like, it may be looking at the resilience of healthcare workers right now.
yes,
I mean,
yeah,
across every, aspect of the world right now, there's a lot of hardship and there's so much resilience. It's
yes.
really, and it's been incredible to
And
see.
it's important we keep looking for those stories and sharing them,
Yeah.
because that is what gives people hope and
Yeah.
comfort, I think, right now. So yeah. Okay.
Awesome. So those of you who are watching, I want you to take a minute, tell Tara and I, what is your biggest takeaway from this training that we offer today for you? We want to know, what is your biggest takeaway about how to be more effective participating in or leading virtual teams? Tara, I know you are swamped right now. I want to thank you so much for giving us the most precious
My
gift,
pleasure.
your time and knowledge. It's so great to reconnect with you, my friend.
Yes, thank you. It was a real pleasure. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have an amazing day.
Bye, everybody.